Welcome to Blender Products. Today we're going to be building a vertical blade double bank channel blender, as you can see here. When your channel blender arrives in its crate, please inspect the channel blender for any material damage. If any is noticed, please contact Blender Products. With the channel blender, there will be a box of hardware, and in this box of hardware is a pair of cleco pliers, which are used to remove the temporary fasteners used for shipping. The cleco pliers and the clecos must be returned to Blender Products with the prepaid shipping label upon completion of the assembly. Additionally, there will be a build direction diagram and a list of the hardware that's packaged inside your hardware box. The first step to assembling this channel blender, we need to remove the top template by removing the clecos around the channel blender and carry this template into the air handling unit and install it on the ceiling. Now that you have your top template into the air handling unit, we're going to lift it and screw it into the ceiling of your mixing box. We're going to only screw through the slotted holes. Before you start screwing, you want to make sure that your opening is centered with the opening on your mixing box.
Make sure that the pre-installed gasket tape is compressed between the air handling unit ceiling and the install template.
So on the templates, the slotted holes are the only ones we're screwing in at this time. There are circular holes. We do not want to install screws in those holes at this time. Now that we have the top template installed, we're going to take the top back template and remove the cleco fasteners and install it in the air handling unit.
If it is difficult to remove any parts on this pallet, double check that all clecos have been removed.
When you lift this one up, you want to make sure that the alignment patterns align. And again, we're only going to screw in through the slotted holes. Finally, the back bottom template will be removed from the channel blender. Again, we're going to align the alignment grids of these two panels before screwing the template in, and we're going to screw through only the slotted holes. Now that we have the templates up, we want to go through and make sure that all the slotted holes have screws in every piece of the template. If your template doesn't fit in your mixing box, please stop, because the channel blender cannot be assembled if the template doesn't fit. So now we're going to remove this bottom cap and bring it into the air handling unit for installation. In order to remove it from the channel blender, there are temporary fasteners pointing along the channel walls into this bottom cap and a couple on the sides. Those will all need to be removed. Before we can install this bottom cap to the air handling unit, we need to silicone this back flange. Every component that gets attached directly to the template will have silicone on the flange to make an airtight seal. Now we'll take this bottom panel and we'll align it with the holes at the bottom of the template and screw it in. So now we'll take the channel divider, remove the clecos securing the channel divider to the channel blender, and install it to the air handling unit just like that bottom cap. So before we can install this channel divider to the wall, again, we're going to need to silicone this flange, and it's key to point out that there are two flanges. The flange with the sealing tape points away from the wall. Now we'll remove this top cap and install it on the air handling unit. Now we're going to install this top cap to the ceiling of the mixing box. But first we need to apply a bead of silicone along this front edge. when you lift this up here, this flange will be pointing down. And we're gonna line the square holes with the holes on the template and screw only through the square holes. The channel blender was pre-assembled with an assembly direction in mind. So when you start to assemble the channel blender inside your mixing box, you'll work your way away from the door, and as assembly progresses, you'll work your way towards the access door. The first channel wall has a lead-in riveted to the end wall. Additionally, each channel is numbered sequentially, 1, 2, 3, and so on. First, we're gonna wanna take these brackets off and set them aside. And remove the clecos from this damper frame piece and the side pieces, and lift this end wall up. Before you install your first end wall, marked number 1, to the mixing box, we need to silicone this flange, and this bottom plate right here. Additionally, we'll silicone this channel divider flange right here. We'll take this end wall and we'll lift it up, aligning the holes, and start screwing it in. It's recommended to screw in the top corner first and then work your way out on those flanges. So now we're gonna rivet this channel divider to the end wall. On this back flange here, there's a few rivets that need to be hit this way. They can be difficult to see, but because we have light shining in here, we can line them up. If you're having difficulty hitting those rivets from the side of the channel blender, you can also grab a ladder and shoot them from the inside out. So as we're walking through installing these channel walls, be careful of all these sharp corners because they can cut you. It's sheet metal. We're going to want to rivet on this one, this lead-in to the channel divider. And we'll need to rivet the lead-in right here. So now, for the following channel walls, we'll need to remove clecos from the ends of the lead-ins, and then we can lift the channel walls up. Before you put your channel walls on, you want to inspect the tape around the seams. This tape is not placed properly. Sometimes that happens during shipping. You can peel it and re-stick it so it covers the split channel wall. If the tape is damaged or missing, we do supply a roll of black foam tape in your hardware kit that you can replace the tape. The tape is on the top and the bottom of the channel walls. So now we can install the channel wall in the lead-in assembly. So we're gonna lift it up into place. We're gonna rock it in. And this part's pretty crucial, but the channel wall here needs to sit firmly up against the sealing tape on this back lead-in before you start riveting it. We'll also hit your turning vanes. Make sure they're lined up. Sometimes you need to look over to ensure that the rivet is through the channel wall and through the turning vane. We will need to use a Tech screw to screw in this flange to this top panel. The hole in this flange should align with the hole on the top panel and the template. We also need to rivet this bottom flange and this back tab to the bottom cap. So now we're just going to continue taking the channel walls off of the shipping assembly in sequential order, 2, 3, 4, 5, and down the line until you're completed. And just rinse and repeat. Rock the panel up there, hit your rivets. Be sure to get your lead-ins, your turning vanes, the brackets on the bottom and the top.
It is crucial that every rivet is installed before moving onto the next channel wall because the space between the channels is too close together to be able to install rivets after the fact. If any rivets are missed, you can try to use a hand rivet tool to install the missing rivets, or you can work backwards, removing the obstructing channel walls until you have access to install the missing rivets.
To get the last channel wall off, you'll need to remove clecos from the end plate. And if there's any on the damper frame, there as well. Now you can remove the end wall, and now you have access to your last channel wall for assembly inside the mixing box. For the end wall here, we're going to want to silicone the top and back flanges. We also want to silicone this flange right here where that end wall is going to mate up. Then we can lift the back wall, or the end wall, up to the channel blender. We're also going to want to silicone the channel divider back here as well. Now we can lift it up into place, and we can rivet the turning vanes and the lead-ins. Now that we have the channel walls assembly built and both end plates on, we're going to want to rivet the two holes in the back of this bottom flange on both sides. So now we're going to use Tech screws to screw this flange on the back and top into the air handling unit. Just as we did with the first side, it's best to start in the top corner and work your way out. So now we'll take the front piece of the bottom cap into the AHU, and we want to be sure to silicone along this seam right here where the two pieces of metal connect. When you're riveting this front cap on, you want to hit the holes that are right in this 080 piece of metal right here along the way, as well as the holes and this back flange right here. Do not hit the holes closest to the damper, the channel blender where the dampers will go. So now that you have all the rivets on this bottom flange in the front hit, you can hit this last rivet that's right here. On a double bank unit, we need to install this gray gasket tape on these two edges here on every single channel wall. We don't install it during shipping because it's likely to get damaged. So at this time, inspect all the sealing tape on this front face as well. If some of it's damaged, you can either replace it with the gasket tape provided or just peel it and re-stick it. So now we'll put the middle plate up here in between the two damper banks. This part is not symmetrical, so if you go to line it up, you want to line it up with these holes and these holes here. If they don't quite line up, you can flip the thing 180 and it will fit just fine. What we want to do is we want to silicone this flange and that flange over there. And when we install this into here, it goes on the inside of the end plates. To connect the middle plate to the side, there's two rivets right here in the center of this. Before we put this top panel on, we want to go through and inspect all the tape. So as you can see, this piece of tape right here is not covering the channel wall split. So what we need to do is we need to try and peel it off. And if you can't peel it off, we can scrape it off and apply a new piece of tape right here. So now to install this front piece of the top cap, we need to silicone the two ends and this top flange. There are a couple larger holes on the two ends, and those two holes are clearance holes that will pop over the tech screws that we installed with the template. So as we're going through and riveting this together, we want to hit this line of holes. We will tech screw this top flange into the mixing box. We'll also hit this line of holes here, the first one over this bend. We do not want to hit any of the holes closest to where the damper frame is going to go, including the one on the very end. We need to add silicone where the damper frame is going to contact the plate on the top, in the middle, before we install the damper frame. So that's probably about a ½ an inch away from this edge is where we want to apply our bead of silicone all the way down. So now we'll take the damper frame off of the shipping pallet. In order to do so, there's a drive screw right here, and on both sides there'll be a couple. We need to remove those. This bracket on the bottom that goes along the perimeter of this does not get removed. Those are just for shipping. Those can be discarded once you're done. So now that we're going to install the bottom damper frame, again, we have the silicone along this slant right here, and same right here. We want to keep the silicone about a ½ an inch away from this edge. We're going to bring in this damper frame. The help of a third person may be beneficial at this point. You want to kind of slide it in there, making sure to align the channels with the split and the finger seal. And once you do have it in place, we can hit the rivets on the side of this damper frame. So we want to point out the rivets on the side of the damper frame that you need to hit in order to keep the damper frame secured to the channel blender. So there's 2 lines of them. On this particular blender, there is a total of 6, but depending on the size of your channel blender and the size of the damper frame, there may be more. When you put these in there, you want to make sure that the channel wall, the end wall, doesn't get pushed back with the rivet. So having your hand on the inside to keep some pressure helps ensure that the rivet goes through both pieces of metal. We want to make sure that there are 4 fingers of the finger seal on front of this damper stop and 4 behind on both sides, the bottom and the top. Additionally, we want to make sure that the finger seal does not protrude past into this channel wall area. So you may need to wiggle it back and pull the finger seal over in order to get proper alignment. So now we need to compress the top and bottom damper frames onto the damper assembly. First, we're going to loosen up the spacers and take out the spacers on both sides. And then we can snug them back down, not tight. We'll come back and tighten them at the end. During this process, there's an opportunity for the bearings and the bushings to come out of the top or bottom damper frame. So when you're going to snug it back together, you just kind of want to make sure that everything's going smoothly. And sometimes you might have to wiggle them back and forth in order to get them back into place. Here's a good example of a bearing that's seated properly and then one that's not. So if we went to tighten this down right here, it would end up cracking and crushing this bearing and bushing. And if the bearing or the bushing gets broken, it can be very difficult to replace. We'll need to take this anti-rotation bracket off in order to get some of the rivets here and on the top side, because we'll need to move the blades. So in order to do so, we'll take the C-clips off that hold it on, and we can take this off, and this can be discarded. On each damper frame, there's a set of rivets that connect the top to the sides on the top and the bottom. So now we need to go through each one and get those. If the holes aren't quite lined up, you may need to loosen this nut a little bit, the bolt, and then hit your rivets and then retighten the bolt. So to install the side brackets that link the top and bottom damper frames together, this is a structural component. So it may be a little snug, but it slides right in here. You just want to line the holes up with the damper frames and this bracket back here. You may need to give it a little bit of a tap. Then you can insert your bolts and your nuts. Now you can tighten all these bolts and nuts. If your channel blender came with damper frame stiffener brackets, which look like this, we're going to install those now. Your channel blender may have came with two. If it's a double bank channel blender that comes with two of these, please install one per damper bank. If it comes with four, please install two per damper bank. Additionally, your channel blender may have not come with any of these, which means it's not needed and you may skip this step. So to install these, we have this little cutout here, which is designed to slide around the rivet. So you're gonna look through your damper bank, the top, and you're gonna find a little cutout with a hole right here, and that, you know, is where this stiffener is gonna be inserted. So how we're gonna insert that is we wedge it in between the channel wall here, and we get it up. We just sort of rock it in between the two pieces of the channel wall here, and press it in. A hammer may be useful in order to get it all the way in there. Now we're going to take our brackets that get riveted to the channel blender, damper frame. We're going to have one on the top and one on the bottom so that the rivet holes are facing outward. Slide it on there. We can rivet this one on. Now we can use our hammer to tap it down until it's seated against that piece we just hit. Go to the bottom and slide on the bracket just like we did the top to captivate this stiffener. The little hook on the bottom of this stiffening bracket should hook onto the aluminum bracket we just installed in order to keep it all in place. So now we're going to install the linkage bars. This one operates the outside air channels on the bottom bank. So we're going to install it on these damper shafts. You'll notice that there is something called an over travel stop on some of these actuator, these damper linkages. And this is to keep the blade from moving more than 90 degrees. So these are usually on the third and fourth dampers in from the side. There should be one per linkage bar. When we're putting our bushings in the linkage bar down here, we want to insert them from the backside in. For the one that is going to be with the over travel stop, we'll need to cut it a little bit to make room for that over travel stop. So we're just going to cut the material thickness of the over travel stop out of this bushing. You can use a razor blade or dikes to cut this, or a little rotary tool. If you do not cut it, then the linkage bar will not sit flat and the dampers may not actuate as designed. Now we'll take this linkage bar, we're going to slide it onto these damper shafts. Now we'll take our bag of C-clips and we're going to stick them on each of those linkage bars to keep the linkage bar, the bushings, and everything held in place. Now we can test that all the blades that the linkage bars are attached to move in unison. Looking good. Now we'll do the same thing with the linkage bar for the return air channels. Now we're going to repeat the same process for the linkage bars for the top bank. All right, so now we're going to put our actuator brackets on this channel blender. So we're going to grab a backing plate and our back actuator bracket, the first one. We'll do this to both sides of this channel blender because it has 4 actuators.
See our next video on how to install the actuators and clock the damper blades.
So now that we've completed assembling our channel blender, what we'll do is we'll take our Cleco pliers and our Clecos, throw them in the box, slap the prepaid shipping label on it, and ship it back to Blender Products. Thank you.